If you're AuDHD, I need you to listen to me for a second. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 21, and for 9 years I thought that was the answer. I thought I finally had the explanation for why I was the way I was. And then at 30 I was diagnosed with autism. And suddenly, a lifetime that never quite made sense. But those 9 years in between, where I had one piece of the puzzle but not the other, where I knew something was still wrong but I couldn't name it, that was the loneliest period of my life. And I'm making this video because if you are in that space right now, whether you've been diagnosed with one and not the other, or you're questioning, or you just feel like you are too much and not enough at the same time, I need you to know that you're not broken, you're not contradiction, you're AuDHD. And nobody talks about what that gap actually feels like. So I'm going to. Before my ADHD diagnosis, I thought I was lazy. That's the word I used for myself, lazy. Because I couldn't keep focus on things for too long, I would lose interest quickly. I was always looking for the next thing, the next novelty, the next spark. I would start something, a job, a hobby, a routine, and I would be completely obsessed with it for 2 weeks, maybe 3. And then one day it would just stop, like a switch flip, and I couldn't force myself to care anymore. And I thought that made me unpredictable, unstable, because that's what people told me, right? You're so inconsistent. Why can't you stick with anything? You have so much potential if you just apply yourself. And when you hear that enough times, you start to believe it. You start to think, I must be lazy, I must not be trying hard enough, I must be the problem. Nobody told me that losing interest quickly wasn't a character flaw. Nobody told me that the need for novelty was an instability, it was ADHD. So I spent years thinking I was just bad at being a person. Getting diagnosed with ADHD at 21, I'm not going to lie, it was a relief. Like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath for years. I could finally understand and explain some of my behaviors. The losing interest, the novelty seeking, the fact that I couldn't just sit down and focus like other people seem to do so easily. It felt like I had permission to stop blaming myself. But I still felt like a weird person. Because ADHD explained some things, but it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain why social contact was so draining to me. And I don't mean I'm introverted draining. I mean I would come home from being around people and I would need to decompress for hours. Sometimes days. Like my brain had been running a marathon I didn't sign up for. ADHD didn't explain why I always felt like an imposter in social situations. Not like, oh, I'm a little awkward. I mean, I generally felt like I was performing a version of myself that didn't exist. Like I was watching myself interact with people and thinking, who is this person? Because it's not me. And it didn't explain the sensory overwhelm, the lights that felt too bright, the sounds that felt too loud, the textures that made my skin crawl, the feeling of certain clothes in my body that would make me want to rip it off. ADHD didn't explain any of that. So I had a diagnosis and I was grateful for it. But I still felt like there was something I was missing. Like I'd unlocked the door, but there was another one behind it. And I didn't have the key. So for 9 years, I lived in that gap. I knew I had ADHD. I knew that explained part of me. But there was this other part, this whole other layer that I couldn't name. And it made me feel like a contradiction. Because on one hand, my ADHD brain craved novelty. New projects, new people, new experiences. I wanted everything to be excited and fast and stimulating. But on the other hand, there was this thing I couldn't explain, this need for isolation. This terror of being in social situations. The way interacting with people at work was so taxing it would wipe me out for the rest of the day. And I was so rigid with myself. I had all these rules, unspoken rules I created for myself about how things should be done, how my day should look, how I should feel. And when those rules were broken, even by me, it felt like my whole world was shaking. And I had all these sensory aversions, things I've been dealing for my whole life, but I didn't have a word for. Certain foods I couldn't eat, certain environments I couldn't be in, certain sounds that physically hurt. And I'll think, this doesn't fit with ADHD, this is something else. But I didn't know what. And when you don't know what it is, you do what I did. You blame yourself. You think, I'm just difficult, I'm just picky, I'm just too sensitive, I'm just too much. And you mask. You mask so hard because you don't want people to know how much effort it takes just to exist in a world that feels like it's set to a volume you can't control. For 9 years, that was my life. Knowing part of the answer, but feeling like I was failing at whatever the rest was. It didn't happen overnight. It built up slowly. I started to realize that ADHD didn't explain me completely. I kept hitting this moment where I would react to something, a planned change, a social situation, a sensory experience, and I would think, this isn't an ADHD response, this is something else. And I started to notice that I felt like a contradiction, like I was two people living in one body. One person craved novelty and excitement. The other person needed sameness, safety, and quiet. And I couldn't reconcile them. That's when my therapist brought up autism. And I want want to be honest, at first I didn't think it fit, because everything I knew about autism was the stereotype, the clinical version, the one that doesn't look like me. But I started researching, and the more I read, especially about how autism presents in women, in adults, in people that have been masking their entire life, it made so much sense. The social exhaustion, the sensory overwhelm, the need for routine, and the devastation when it breaks, the imposter syndrome in every social interaction, the fact that I always preferred my own company to other people's. It wasn't that ADHD was wrong, it was that ADHD was half of the picture, and autism was the other half. Getting the diagnosis at 30 was like someone handed me the other piece of the puzzle I'd been trying to forge together for years, and suddenly the picture was complete, and it was me. All of me, not just the parts that fit one label. After the diagnosis, I went through this period of reinterpreting my whole life. And if you are AuDHD, you probably know exactly what I mean. It's like you look back at everything, every job, every relationship, every friendship, every meltdown, every time you quit something, every time you pulled away from someone. And suddenly you see it through this new lens. And things that never made sense suddenly made sense. I understood why my jobs as a manager and sales were so devastating to my mental health. Because I was masking so hard every single day, performing enthusiasm, performing social ease, performing I'm a normal person who can handle a surprise meeting at 4 p.m. and it was destroying me from the inside. I understood why I was so quickly to give up on relationships and why I felt relief, actually relief, when I didn't have to maintain them. Because maintaining relationships required masking. And masking is exhausting, and my brain was choosing survival over connection. I understood why I always loved my own company over anybody else's. It wasn't because I was antisocial. It was because being alone was the only time I could take the mask off, the only time my nervous system could rest. And I understood why plan changes were so overwhelming to me. Not I'm annoyed overwhelming, physically, visually overwhelming, like the ground was being pulled out from under me, because my autistic brain had prepared for one reality. And when it changed, my entire system went into crisis. Every single thing I'd blame myself for, every job I couldn't keep, every relationship I let go, every time I needed to be alone instead of with people, it all made sense. And honestly, that was both a relief and a grief, because yes, I finally understood myself. But I also grieved the version of me who spent years thinking she was just broken. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. Even after both diagnoses, there's this feeling that doesn't go away. The feeling of not fitting anywhere. Because here what happens when you are AuDHD. You feel like a contradiction. Your needs change from day to day. One day you need novelty, stimulation, excitement. The next day you need sameness, quiet, isolation. And you can't predict which version of you is going to wake up. And that makes it really hard to feel accepted. When I'm with neurotypicals, I'm masking constantly, performing a version of myself that fits their expectations, suppressing my sensory needs, suppressing my need for routine, suppressing the fact that I'm overwhelmed. So even when I'm with other ADHDers, I still feel like I'm masking, because my experience is so different from theirs. Because my needs change so much from day to day, I can't even keep up with myself, let alone explain myself to others. I feel more comfortable in autistic spaces, but even there I still have the imposter syndrome, like I'm not autistic enough. Like someone's gonna tap me in the shoulder and say, sorry, you don't actually belong here. That's the AuDHD experience that nobody told you about. You're too much for neurotypical spaces, not autistic enough for autistic spaces, not ADHD enough for ADHD spaces. And even in AuDHD spaces, you feel like your experience is too contradictory, too changeable, too much. You feel like you're constantly performing, even in the spaces you're supposed to feel safe. And that's exhausting. So here's what I want to say to you. If you're in that gap right now, between one diagnosis and the other, or between knowing you're different but not having the words yet, I wish someone had told me this. It's okay to be yourself. I know that sounds simple. I know it sounds like something you've heard 1,000 times, but I need you to actually hear it. It's okay to be yourself, with all your contradictions, with your changing needs, with the fact that one day you want everything and the other day you want nothing. That's not instability, that's AuDHD. And you don't need to be loved by everyone. I spent so much energy trying to be someone that everyone could love. Someone consistent, someone predictable, someone who could handle social situations and plan changes and sensory overload without flinching. And the truth is that people who love you will continue to love you even when you express your real needs. Even when you say, I can't do that today. Even when you say, I need to be alone. Even when you say, this is too loud for me. Even when you change your mind. Even when you need something different today than you needed yesterday. The people who really love you will stay. And the ones who don't, they were never asking for you. They were asking for the version of you who made them comfortable. And that version was never real. If you're AuDHD, you're not broken, you're not a contradiction. You're not too much or not enough. You're AuDHD. And the fact that you feel like both at the same time doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means your brain works differently, and that's okay. Take your time, figure it out at your own pace, and stop trying to fix into a box that was never designed for you. If this video helped you, subscribe. I post long-form videos every Thursday and shorts during the week. And leave a comment if you've been through this identity crisis. I read every single one. You're not alone.